The worst thing you could possibly do would be to be raising taxes on anybody in the middle of what most Americans think is a recession.
That's Republican Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. Now some Democrats in the Senate and the House are also questioning the wisdom of letting the Bush tax cuts expire for anyone. Are they making this change because they finally realize it's common sense economics? Or is it all about trying to stay in power and after Election Day they'll revert to their old tax and spend ways? To our freedom fighters, radio host and good friend of the show Nancy Skinner, Ayn Rand Institute President Yaron Brook, and my friend and Fox Business Network colleague, Stocks Editor Elizabeth MacDonald. That's a long monitor, so I'll call you EMAC,
sure,
which is what we all call you. Skinner, to you first. If you concede that the top 25% of all consumer spending and all investment comes from the top 3% of wage earners, why should the government raise taxes on them in any time, much less a recession?
Well, I object, Judge, and I don't concede that point at all. And 3 Democrats does not make a party split. One of those Democrats is my congressman. I think they're looking at their high net worth constituents as opposed to where Americans are, which is 44% want the tax cuts to expire for the very, very wealthiest of Americans. You know what, Judge? I was thinking about this. If Obama in the Congress did absolutely nothing, didn't lift a finger, all the tax rates would go up on everybody. So could we call them the Bush tax increases if we did nothing, right?
Well,
now, Obama has to decide whose taxes to lower and whose to let remain, because we have a deficit and a recession.
Got it. A little history lesson.
That's what we're doing.
The only reason those taxes are going up is because that's the only way President Bush could get them through, was by having them sunset in order to get the votes that he needed in the Congress at the time. But putting aside the politics, is it not Economics 101 that the top 2 or 3% of wage earners contribute far more than their numbers indicate to the economy, like 25% of consumer spending and 30 or 40% of investment? And is it not insane then to take dollars in the form of taxes away from them, which could be used to provide jobs and investment?
Yes, yes, and yes to all of that. It's impenetrably absurd what the Democrats are saying. Look, the Democrats and the White House have spent $2.8 trillion since they got into office. The president got into office 20 months ago. We collect only $2.1 trillion in federal revenues from companies and individuals. And by the way, 28 House Democrats and 12 Senate Democrats voted for the Bush tax cuts in 2001. Half of the business income, $500 billion, would be taxed at the higher rate. And if the Bush tax cuts expire, that income could go towards creating jobs in this country.
So which produces more prosperity? The central planning of the economy, the government taking whatever taxes it wants, or letting people spend and invest their money with their own risk as they see fit?
Look, people who make $250,000 or more are by definition the most productive people in our economy. To tax people for being more productive, for creating more wealth, for creating jobs, for creating economic activity is not only insane from an economic perspective, but it is immoral. It is wrong to do so. What we need is to lower taxes on the most productive people in the economy so they invest, so that they create jobs, so they create economic activity.
Skinner, why do the Democrats hate the rich? And why don't the Democrats understand Economics 101?
Because here's the thing, that's mumbo jumbo. We will have to borrow. We're in deficit and debts right now. We will have to borrow that money from the Chinese, mortgage our children's future to lower those tax rates. Let me just finish my sentence.
Spending?
All right.
That's the way to solve the deficit and to create economic activity.
Right. That's never brought up, right? You're going to create an economic... Go ahead, Judge.
What will it take for the Democrats and even the Republicans that preceded them, who were just as bad in the Bush years, to reduce spending? That undercuts Skinner's argument.
Yes, and you never hear that out of the White House or the Democrats right now. You do not want to cause an economic contraction in the jobs, small business sector by hiking rates on them just to pay what Nancy's talking about is paying off the $14 trillion deficit. You will not cure the deficit by doing that, by causing rates to go up on the small business owner. What will happen is that you're going to lose jobs.
Go ahead, Nancy, quickly.
I don't think you've proven to me that by raising the marginal tax rate on over $250,000 crowd, that's going to, Bill Gates is not going to get out of bed and create any more jobs because he's so wealthy that 4%
You're talking about Bill Gates. We are talking about the small business owner, 40% of whom would get hit by the higher taxes. Max Baucus, when he voted for the Bush tax cuts in 2001, said 80% of small businesses would benefit from the Bush tax cuts. He was for it, so is Mary Landrieu and Dianne Feinstein.
It's the rich people that employ people.
Yeah, absolutely. You know who's getting this, who's getting that the solution is cutting? It's Cuba. Cuba laid off 500,000 government employees this week because they're in deep economic trouble, and the solution is to cut government spending, to get government out of the economy. If the Cubans get it, it's about time the Democrats...
Nancy, I want to switch gears a little bit. Will the government, whether it's run by Republicans or Democrats, ever reduce spending on a large scale? Or are we inevitably and hopelessly addicted to this level of $1.5 trillion spending more than we take in per year? Nancy?
Are we ever going to cut spending? Absolutely. That's why we instituted pay-as-you-go. And that's why health care was paid for and reduces the long-term deficit picture. Ultimately, health care is designed to do that. Yes, it is paid for. Every bit of it was paid for.
Okay, the CBO says it's not paid for.
We have such a fundamental disconnect between those who believe that prosperity comes by the government micromanaging and those who believe that prosperity comes by individual investment and risk. Can we ever bridge that gap?
Well, no, until those who believe that government creates any kind of wealth open their eyes and look at history and look at what's actually happened. Those economies that leave individuals to create wealth, that leave people free to live their lives as they choose, those are the societies where wealth is created, where prosperity exists, and where people are free to pursue their happiness, where we have freedom. Other societies, you know, are poor, you know, are shrinking. And you know, that system has failed and failed over and over and over again.
15 seconds before we take the
Only $680 billion will be collected by letting the Bush tax cuts in the upper bracket expire annually. That would hardly cover the cost of annual pork spending or a subsidy or here or there.
Skinner, Brook.